Hey everyone, now in this tutorial we're going to be looking at variation 1 of Uncle Harry's Variations, a theme and set of variations that I've composed for you guys to work on. Now this is kind of a standalone mini-series, but it's also functioning as part of my intermediate piano course. So if you happen to be following the intermediate piano course, then this is tutorial 7 in that course, okay? But if you're not, it doesn't matter. You can learn Uncle Harry's Variations completely independently of following that course. Now in the previous tutorial, which I'll link in the description text below, we looked at the theme from the theme and variations. As I explained back then, when you have a theme and variations, you have a fairly basic piece of music, which is then varied in different ways as a set of variations. And today we're going to be looking at variation 1. But as I said, if you want to learn the original theme, I'll link that below. As usual, there is a PDF of the score linked down in the description text, and also you can find it if you go to billspianopages.com/intermediate and look at lesson 7. Look under lesson 7 and you'll be able to download the score from there. So let's have a play through this thing. It's marked Allegro non troppo, which means fast and lively, but not too much. Now, I don't want you to be kind of like, oh my word, this is far too fast for me to manage. Even if you're only playing it at half the speed that I'm doing, that's fine. What I'm most interested in is accuracy, because we're going to be learning and developing some useful skills in this variation. Okay, so there it is. Like I said, don't get too hung up on the tempo of the thing. It's far more important that you play it musically and accurately, yeah? With that in mind, let's start off by looking at the left hand, where we have this Alberti bass pattern. And then every now and then we've got a little bit of broken chord or something else. But nearly all, or a little bit of scale later on, but nearly all the way through we've got that Alberti bass. And the way you play that Alberti bass is going to have a big impact on the overall quality of the piece. When people start off playing Alberti basses, they often really thump down on the lowest note. And I want you to avoid that as far as you can. Make the notes relatively close together in evenness. There's no need to be really obsessive about this, but we want a nice smooth sound. Yeah, the lowest note is going to stand out a little bit because it's the lowest note, but try not to bash down on it. The way professionals deal with this problem of playing Alberti bass is sort of smoothly and evenly, is to rotate their wrists. Okay, so the kind of hand is moving kind of up and down like an old-fashioned sewing machine. I can't really describe that because I struggle to imagine it, because I've got this weird physiology in my hands. Those of you who follow my channel regularly will know this. In my hands and lower arms, I've got this weird bone structure, which means that I can't actually rotate my wrist. Yeah, so I have to rely on my fingers to play these things evenly. But that's roughly what you need to do. Focus on the evenness. Yeah. What I would do to start with is just practice that left hand by itself and kind of get comfortable with it, because there are quite a few jumps. Later on in the piece, there are quite a few places where you're having to do quite big stretches. Okay, so get used to that. You'll find if you've got a jump or a stretch, then it's difficult to avoid thumping. So at the start of bar 5, well, if we go from the end of bar 4, in bar 4 we've got this. But at the start of bar 5 you go down to the E, and it's quite difficult to avoid just a little bit of a thump on the E there. Don't get too hung up about that, but just bear in mind that the more evenly the more evenly you can play it, the better. Okay, so the right hand starts off pretty simple and straightforward. Notice the phrase marks. Okay, I'll play the first few bars and exaggerate the phrasing. Takes us to bar 8. I did a bit of a slowdown there. Did you see how I was phrasing there? So under the long phrase marks, I'm playing those lines very legato, okay? And just having a little bit of a tiny lift off between phrases, okay? So practice playing that as expressively as you can. You'll notice that, next to the MP marking in the first bar, I've put express, just short for espressivo, meaning play it expressively. You should be able to really kind of dig into that. I've given you room to kind of say quite a lot there. So do what you can with that. Really try to shape the phrases. Now things get more exciting when we get to bar 9 and we have kind of a similar melody, which, the melody at the start is really just a very slight variation of the main theme melody that we looked at in the previous tutorial. But from bar 9, it goes into, very approximately, into thirds. Yeah? So let me just play bars 9, 10 and 11 for you. Let me do that again. Yeah, so all that's really happening is that we have a slight change in the melody and things are thickening up a little bit, but we also have this kind of exciting scale run in thirds. Now, couple of things to notice here. I've marked it poco leggero. Okay, so leggero just kind of means lightly and playfully. I don't want you to be really thumping on these things. You can use a little bit of pedal to stick them together. I'll talk more about pedal shortly. But most of all, look at the fingers you're using in that downward run in bar 10. And again. Yeah, I've marked them into the score. As is usual in piano scores, some of the fingering is implicit. So at the start of bar 10, I've assumed that you will work out it's the first and third that you're using on that A and C, okay? Most piano editors will do that. In the early days of the intermediate course, and especially in the beginner's course, I marked in much more fingering. Now I'm trying to kind of step back and mark in less, let you work it out for yourself and not clutter up the score with lots of fingerings. Now, if you look at the way I fingered that run, typically what I'm doing is trying to do it as smoothly as possible, but it's unavoidable. You have to jump. Okay, so often you're kind of holding one note as the other fingers are going over. Yeah, and typically the way you'll mask that is by, first of all, doing it reasonably quickly, but doing it lightly and with a little bit of pedal. And like I said, we'll talk about how to pedal this stuff a little bit later, because that's a little bit of an art in itself. Now, when you get to these sections, the thing to do, because they're quite tricky, is to isolate them and practice them over and over and over and over. So the first time you play bar 10, you will probably be kind of really... it'll be quite agonising. One thing that will help you is that there aren't many cross rhythms, okay? So the quavers, the eighth notes in the left, are all timed exactly against the quavers, the eighth notes in the right, okay? So that makes it a little bit easier for you. But isolate those little bits and play them over and over again. There's a little bit more tricky fingering when we get to bar 15, where things stop and we get this scale run, ultimately in two hands. And then from the thumb on the G in the right there, you have a fourth on the A, and that lets you sit neatly on the first of these kind of octave spanning chords. Okay, let me do that again. So from bars 15 and 16 basically. Yeah. Now, when you get, if we go over the page onto bar 17, if you look at these big octave spanning chords, you might think those look quite scary. Actually, they're easier than the runs in thirds, okay? They just take a little bit of practice. Okay, do pay close attention to what's going on in the left hand, because there are quite a few little variations and tweaks of that Alberti bass pattern, okay? So make sure you're playing what is written in the score. If you're not sure, listen back, once you've practiced a few times, listen back to my performance and just make sure it sounds the same, okay? But in general, you shouldn't find those right hand chords too much, okay? Later on in the right hand, there are various kind of interesting things going on. When you get to bar 25, 26, 27, you'll see that those fairly simple chords in the right hand there, I've marked marcato, which means I want them to kind of stand out by themselves. Let me just play from the rit and the tempo. So we get the rit, the slowing down in bar 23. And then back to speed. I really emphasised it there, but that's the kind of marcato effect I want. I want those chords to be kind of crunchy, to kind of stand out. Then I don't mark the end of the marcato section because really it's pretty obvious, because we get into another scale. And I think that run up, bar 29, bar 30, is actually the hardest bit in the piece. It looks relatively straightforward, but it's the thirds again, but this time you're going up. Exactly the same principles apply as last time. Focus on it, isolate it, kind of work on it by itself lots and lots of times, probably hundreds of times, okay? To practice this to the point where I could play it at this speed, at kind of performance level as I've just done, I probably played those sections 100 times each, okay? And I wrote the thing. Yeah, it's fairly common that I write things that I find difficult to play. But it's just a little bit awkward. You will master it. There's nothing in there that is super, super difficult. You simply have to learn it, okay? So have a go at that and see how you get on. Now, I said I was going to say something about pedalling, okay? The usual advice is pedal with the chords, and that kind of works here, but also it kind of doesn't, because often, if you look back at the start of the score especially, we've got a chord lasting quite a long time. Bars 1 and 2 is just a G chord all the way through. And if I played it with pedal down all the way, yeah, it's just beginning to get a little bit too ringy in the right hand. What I would generally do in the simple sections is, yes, pedal if there's a chord change, but also pedal at the end of every new bar, new measure. That will roughly get you on the right track. But then when you've got the kind of the sections in thirds, you might, depending on your piano, get away with pedaling that whole bar by itself. What did I do? Yeah, I kind of round about the F sharp, A, E, G, D, F sharp. I kind of fluttered the pedal a little bit. I can't give you any hard and fast guidelines here because it's really going to depend on your piano. The number one thing is to listen to the effect you have. If you hear those thirds getting kind of mushy, kind of running into each other too much, especially against that left hand, then just think about where you can just lift the pedal a little bit and re-pedal, okay? And if you need to mark it on your score, do that, okay? Same thing goes for the sections in octaves. Just listen, use your ear. Above all, don't hold the pedal down and let it become a mush, and whatever you do, try to do it consciously. Try to let it be an actual decision. Okay, let me just say something about the tempo and the dynamics. First of all, tempo, like I said, don't worry about playing it up to the speed I did. Do also feel free to use a little bit of rubato, okay? Once again, it's a bit like pedaling. These things often aren't marked in, but a composer expects you to use your common sense. There are places here where you can play around with the timing a little bit, and it will add to the musicality of it. Yeah, maybe exaggerating just slightly there, but you can do that kind of thing and the piece will sound better as a result. That's a perfectly standard thing to do, even though it's not marked in the score. This is a solo, you're not playing with a drummer. Do feel free to play around. I have marked in a ritenuto, like I said earlier, at bars 23, 24. Play around with that, see what happens for you, okay? I didn't really slow down too much in bar 23, I don't think, but then I took bar 24. I kind of, really slowed down there, yeah? Before gradually coming back up to tempo in bar 25. And I didn't actually come back up to tempo straight away, I don't think. I'm trying to remember what I did. Play around with it. These, written instructions in any score are not hard and fast guidelines. They are there as an indication of what the composer intended, but you should bring your own interpretation to it, okay? Similarly, at the end, you could slow down quite a lot, actually. I didn't very much, but you could do, going from bar 31. Yep. Oh, by the way, I didn't say anything about that MD marking in bar 33. It just means it's short for mani destra, right hand, which means basically what the implication is, you're holding that G chord in the right hand with the pedal, and then using your right hand to play that full, kind of broken chord in the left. And because it's all a G chord, it doesn't particularly matter. Okay, obviously you have to use a pedal because, as you can see, you've got two Gs down there, you've got this D, and you've got that G. Unless you've got, sort of three hands, you couldn't play that any other way. Okay, so that's kind of tempo covered off. Look also at the dynamic markings. It starts off MP, moderately soft. Okay, that gives you a fair amount of latitude. But don't feel it has to be constant. You can vary it a little bit yourself. Yeah, you're getting, especially if you're going through the intermediate course, you're getting to the stage now where you can start to use your own judgment about where to swell out little phrases. Yeah, so the MP, the MF, the F, whatever is just guidance. What is worth paying attention to are the areas where I've marked hairpins for crescendi and decrescendi, especially if you look at bar 15, where you have the start of that scale run. Now the thing is, most musicians, most piano players don't really need a crescendo marking followed by an F there, because the music implies what the dynamic should be. But I've put it there just as a kind of indication that is actually what I want. Then in bar 21, there's a decrescendi in that kind of fancy broken chord in the left. Okay, fluffed a bit in the right hand there, no big deal. And notice that on that chord there in bar 23, I've put a little accent marking, a little stress marking. Just give it a tiny little bit of an extra push. I've done the same thing actually in on that same chord in bar 32. Just to give it that little extra bit of character. So certainly, yes, observe the dynamic markings and the tempo markings, but also feel free to kind of make them your own. Okay, think about how you're going to express it here. Even if you play it technically perfect, you won't have done as well as I want you to if your performance sounds exactly like mine. Okay, that sounds kind of cranky, because surely my performance is how it should be done. No, it's not, because everyone interprets pieces like this slightly differently. So put something of yourself in it, okay? Think about how you can express it, what you want to say with the piece, and kind of play around with the tempo and the dynamics on that basis. Okay, finally, just a few words about how you might practice this thing, because I think your success or otherwise, you're not going to fail, but you might get frustrated if you don't practice it the right way. Your success is going to depend on having a good practice strategy. What I would do is start off, even if it seems relatively simple to start with, start off with separate hands practice, okay? See if you can automate that left hand just a little bit and get a comfortable feeling in the left hand, then put the right hand over the top. Like I said, the really tricky bits, those little runs in thirds and maybe the octaves and stuff, isolate them, cut it down really to kind of a 2 or 3 bar length. Okay, so you might say to yourself, I'm going to practice bars 9, 10 and 11 in isolation. And just do that lots of times. I have done it lots of times, so I'm playing it okay. You wouldn't do it that quickly. Your first few times might be much more sort of error prone and smudgy and whatever. A really good thing I think that I do is to kind of give myself an objective measure of some sort of success is practice a little section like that a certain number of times. So I'll isolate a 3-bar section like that and say, right, I'm going to play this through 40 times. And literally, I'll have a pencil and a piece of paper and I will tally off 40 times through. You need, with tricky things like that, you need to practice them well past the point at which you feel you've got them. So if you stop practicing after the first time you got it right, then that's no good, because 9 times out of 10 afterwards you might get it wrong. You've got to practice it and practice it and practice it. So actually it's only 1 time out of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 that you're fluffing it, okay? So you need to practice well past the point at which you think, yes, I've got this, because sometimes that can be a bit of an illusion. You can think you've got something when you haven't. So I would work on the whole thing, but then isolate these individual sections, because you'll probably find that the easy sections, that the first few bars in particular, you can master those pretty quickly. If you're this far in the intermediate course, you should get those within a few days even. But the difficult sections might take you a few weeks, okay? So be patient. Don't get too frustrated if the difficult bits don't seem to be coming together. Just work away at them diligently, okay? And be prepared for it to take a few weeks. If you're aiming to get it up to the tempo that I was playing at, or even faster, maybe, allegro non troppo, don't go too mad, then be prepared to be practicing this for at least several weeks. Okay, little and often, the usual guidance on practice applies. A little bit every day if you can, and you will get there. But don't beat yourself up if by the time the next lesson in this series drops, you have not got this up to speed, because that's not a problem at all. Okay, finally, if you are following the intermediate series, then you will know that it's a while since we've learned a new scale. So in today's PDF, in this lesson's PDF, which like I said you can find linked below, I've included the score for a brand new scale. It's a scale of E major over 2 octaves in 2 hands, and you'll see that it has 4 sharps, yeah? You should be at a stage now where you can work it out from the score, but I'll just play it through so you can see what it looks like. Yeah, so get to work on that, add it to your usual scale practice. By all means, do it over more than 2 octaves, yeah? It's really good to get your scales up to 4 octaves if you can. Yeah, and down again. But if you just start with 2 octaves, that's fine. And remember to keep practicing those scales as often as you can, ideally kind of every time you sit down at the piano. A piece like the one we've been working on today really should show you why scales are so useful, because a lot of those scale runs fall under your hands much easier if you practice your scales regularly. Okay, there we go. I hope you're enjoying this series so far, whether you're following the intermediate series or you're just following the kind of Uncle Harry's variation series within a series, as it were. Any questions, as usual, drop me a message down in the comments. Always happy to hear from people. Don't forget to like this tutorial and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done those things already. And also follow me on social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Heaven help me, links are down below. There we go. Happy practicing. Let me know if you run into any problems. I'll see you next time.